we got up to verse number 66 yesterday, but I want to just go back we'll start at verse 64, because we started a little slightly new topic here. The previous verses are a little bit dry sounding. The Sthitaprajna, he doesn't go too high, he doesn't get too low, always practicing concentration, very steady, this and that. Then we get to this section, we find out the real beauty of this whole thing, that the Sthitaprajna, the sage, God-realized sage, attains to something which is referred to here as prasada. And we know this term. Kids, what is prasad? It's a food, huh? The offered food. So this prasada has it's a very rich term. It has all different layers of meaning. Here, it refers to a state of very peaceful, calm joy. It's not the type of joy that we're used to, where we're singing and dancing and enjoying delicious food or anything like that. It's a very calm, quiet type of peace. It refers to a state of mind where the mind is very translucent. It's a very quiet mind. And when the mind becomes quiet, then the reality of the self within shines through that type of mind. So we're all trying to attain to this state of prasada, which is referred to here. It's a state of grace. So this word prasada also means grace. This is what Ramakrishna means, the grace of the mind. The grace of the mind, that type of mind will be our best friend, our best companion. Swami Vivekananda has a very interesting section. In some place he refers to the Atman as my friend. We don't think of it in those terms that way, but we get to that point where we feel that divine presence within as something very calming and very peaceful. And then we understand that what we've been seeking is not some dry philosophical abstract principle of consciousness, but the source of all peace and joy. As a very, very deep type of calm peace. So this prasada also means a little bit of this idea of santosha, contentment. We don't care for anything else, we're perfectly content. There's an Atmarama state. This is another very beautiful term, that we rejoice in the self. We get all of our comfort, our peace, everything from the self within. So this is that state. This says prasadam adhigachyati in verse 64, that when the mind is free from all this running after everything and likes and dislikes and attains to some type of self-control, it doesn't mean that we become stone-like. That we attain to this great state of peace, and when we achieve that, verse 65, we find that all sorts of things that used to bother us, that used to make our lives miserable, they disappear. This sarva dukkha, this hani comes, they simply disappear. And this prasanna chetas, this mind which has attained to that state of grace, that state of quietude, in that state our wisdom becomes fixed. We have a certain type of clarity. We can see things clearly that we couldn't see before. So this grace of the mind, this quietude of the mind, this contentment that comes. This contentment is a very special thing. Holy Mother has a statement, one of the most beautiful statements that really sums up all of spiritual life. She says that Shojjo che gunne, santosh che dhonne. There's no virtue that can compare to forbearance. That means whatever comes I can accept. Surrender, forbearance, all of that. And there's no treasure in life that can compare to contentment. The greatest treasure in life, contentment. We're not running after this and after that. Whatever we have, we're content. The whole life is spent in either trying to avoid things we don't like or running after things that we don't have and we want. Right? Yogakshema, these two things. We have it, and how do we keep from losing it? We don't have it. Somebody else, we want it. We think we'll be happy if we get it. And when we get it, it wasn't what we really thought it was. Or then again, we have to cling to it. We're afraid of losing it. So contentment is the greatest treasure. Right? It's a very beautiful statement. And how do we get it? Surrender, acceptance. Whatever comes, we say yes. Let anything come. I can handle anything. Swami Vivekananda talks about the bull with a little mosquito that sits on its horn. And the mosquito's living there for a while and thinks maybe I'm disturbing the bull. So he says, Mr. Bull, excuse me, I've been living on your horn for a long time now. I hope I haven't been disturbing you. And he said, what? Disturbing me? You stay as long as you want. Bring your whole family if you like. It won't bother me. So we should be like that. That have that strength in all the problems in life that we think are so horrible or nothing to us. We can handle anything. That type of forbearance that brings this type of contentment. So this prasada, we'll have several verses here. It comes up later also. This mana prasada, we'll get different terms. This grace of the mind, and this peaceful mind, this calm mind, this translucent mind, transparent mind, gets filled with wisdom. So the Sthitaprajna will have that type of mind, prasanna cheta. So then we get to verse 66. Nasti buddhir ayuktasya na cha yuktasya bhavana na cha bhaveda shantir ashantasya kutas sukham. There's no buddhi. Buddhi has two basic meanings. One is the intellect, the other is intelligence. So this will be the same thing. There's no intelligence, there's no wisdom. We won't get that higher wisdom if we're not yukta means we have some control. Self-control, that means also peacefulness and calmness in everything. Unless we have that, we won't get this higher wisdom. We think that wisdom is a question of the mind. We think it's a question of intelligence. It's not a question of intelligence. It's a question of intuition. That question of feeling. All of this higher type of wisdom that is gained through this meditative process when the mind becomes calm and peaceful. We don't have to be geniuses for this. We don't have to be Sanskrit scholars. We don't have to be philosophers. If we can get this mind to enter into that peaceful, calm state where we're yukta, we don't have to think of it as in terms of that we have perfect control over everything. It means that the mind is steady. The mind is steady and peaceful. If we don't have that, we may be the most intelligent people in the world. If we have no control over the mind, it's restless all the time, we won't get this higher wisdom. So, na asti, there is no buddhi for the ayukta, someone who doesn't have this quality of control and calmness and peacefulness. Then, for the same person, ayukta, there's no bhavana. Bhavana, it doesn't mean, in Bengali, of course, maybe Hindi also, it means we worry about something. It doesn't mean that. Bhavana means the ability to get the mind in this meditative state, bhava, something like bhava. You know, this nacha yuktasya bhavana, there's a pun here, you know. I remember the first time I heard this, I was sitting, you know, our President Maharaj, so the Swami Atmajnanananda. This is many years ago. He was just a trustee. We were sitting at the same table eating, having tea together. And he's drinking his tea, and he says, it's nacha yuktasya bhavana. You know what it means in Bengali? Nothing to worry about if you have a cup of tea. Cha yukta. Cha yukta. Cha yukta. Cha yukta. No bhavana, nothing to worry about if you have. Anyhow, it doesn't mean that, but that is, and I've heard that joke many times. Okay, so you can teach your Sanskrit students. Let's tell you, this is bhavana. So there's no buddhi, so there's no higher wisdom, and this ability of the mind to feel. Bhavana in meditation is more a question of feeling than thinking. We have to get into a state. The mind is into a mood. Meditation is about a mood. Getting into a devotional mood or a spiritual mood, or something like that. That won't happen with the restless mind. So this yukta, it means the mind is not restless. Then, if we don't have this ability to make the mind calm and peaceful, and to get into a different, raise the mind to a higher level, intuitive level, this is bhavana. If we don't have that, then there's no peace. Shanti. There's no peace, because that means the mind will be restless. If the mind is full of thoughts and desires, and it'll be a restless mind. So if we can sit and let the mind transcend this cognitive level and reach this intuitive level, where we're feeling that some deep type of emotion, to get into a mood, a spiritual mood, we'll find that we reach a certain type of peace. Now, the very beautiful statement here, ashantasya, for someone who doesn't have that, then where is happiness? This is not the happiness that we think of going to the movies and having fun and playing and all of that. It's a very deep type of contentment. Again, so we're emphasizing here this yukta. This is the first thing. Yukta, don't think in terms of strong willpower. I won't allow the mind to go here. I won't amount. It doesn't mean that. It means that we reach the state where we're not under the control of external things. The mind itself reaches a level where it's not restless and running after everything all the time. When we reach that state, then the mind can go into this a higher level of spiritual mood. If we can do that, I'm just putting everything in a positive way. This whole thing is negative. If we can't do one, we don't do the other. But if we can do that, if we can get the mind to that level, then we can reach that state of peace. And this is the real meaning of happiness, spiritual happiness, when the mind enters into this state of peace. We're going to go through these final verses a little faster just because of the time factor, and I'm going to leave a little time also for some discussion or questions at the end. Then 67, Indriyanam hi charatam yalmano luvadhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayanagam evam kasi. We have several verses where everything is in the negative, but we get a positive meaning out of it. So, yanmana. So, what type of mind are we talking about here? We're talking about the type of mind that will be running after these wandering senses. This anuvidhiyate. This is a vidhi. A vidhi is a directive. Anu, the directive, it means that we have to do something in accordance with something else. It means we have no control over it. That we're forced to do it. This is the condition of the mind that is this unripe mind. That everything is a reaction. We have no control over such a mind. And it's at the mercy of all sorts of external things. And at the mercy of our own desires and our own whims and our own passions and all of that. So what happens with this type of mind? This type of mind will do to our wisdom the same thing that a strong gust of wind will do to a boat. It'll knock it off course. So this just as the wind will steal away the boat. This type of mind will steal away our wisdom, this prajna, just as a strong wind will knock a boat off its course. So it says, for the mind which follows in the wake of the wandering senses. So it follows along helplessly. There's a picture. Sometimes they talk about the boat that doesn't have a keel. You know, the keel that they put down. This keel is our wisdom. Because the wind will come. If we have that, this keel, that means that holding on, that's what Thakur talks about, holding on to a post. We can spin around, we won't fall. If that's down there, the boat can still go straight. If it's not there, the wind will just knock it wherever the wind goes, the boat will go. It may even be overturned. So there's no chance for wisdom when the mind is, that unright mind is like that, at the mercy of all the external things. So this is why we have to have some self-control, also some perspective, some distance. We have to observe the mind, and we have to feel ourselves to be something separate from the mind. Tasmat. So now we've had two negative examples, so we're going to have a therefore. Tasmat yasya mahabaho negurhitani sarvaja. So we're going to get another example. Therefore, the Sthitaprajna will be the type of person whose senses, indriyani, senses and mind also, will sarvaja, in every respect, will be restrained. Nigraha, we've had this nigraha several times now, that they will be restrained from the objects of the senses. So that mind which has this power to decide, the mind which is under our control. This is the key to this state of wisdom. So tasma yasya mahabaho. Therefore, somebody, now we're talking about this sage, whose senses are restrained. Nigraha. Nigraha, if you have a horse that's running all over the place and you pull on the reins, this is nigraha. I mentioned yesterday how we have we get mixed signals about the extent to which we can practice this nigraha. Yeah? First of all, Arjuna says to Sri Krishna that it's impossible. It's impossible to restrain the mind. He said it would be easier to control the wind. How can we catch the wind with a net or something? So that means he's saying it's impossible. So Sri Krishna says that no, it's possible, but it's difficult. And he gives us things that we can do. Then later he'll say, Nigraha kim karisati, is what good will it do? How much can it do? We have to also understand the role of grace in all of this. That at some point we have to realize, yes, that my ability to control the mind is limited. And that what is restraining me? My own nature, my own samskaras, my own personality. We're all slaves to our personality. We're slaves to our habitual ways of thinking and doing things. So we realize that, yes, there's a role that I play. I have to do my best to try to practice self-control. And then at some point I realize that without this grace, that it's impossible. This is that subtle relationship between self-effort and grace. Sri Ramakrishna gives this very helpful, beautiful analogy. His analogies are so simple, sometimes we don't think about them deeply enough. We all know about the bird and the mast of the ship. But how deeply do we think about what it means? Yeah.
Since you mentioned this, and there are some who have not read, please tell us about this famous example.
I'll tell you. So there's a bird that's flying, been flying for a long time, and he's right in the harbor area. It feels very tired, so lands on the top of the mast of a ship and falls asleep. In the meantime, the ship goes out to sea, and it goes out so far that when the bird wakes up and wants to fly back to land, doesn't see the land, so doesn't know what direction to fly in. So flies as far as it can in one direction until it realizes, unless I fly back, I won't be able to make it. So it starts getting tired again. So it flies back to the mast, rests, and goes in the other direction, does the same thing, goes in all four directions, and doesn't find land. Then finally he says, then what to do? Wherever the ship takes me, I'll go, I'll be content. Yeah? I take refuge in the ship. Now, what does it mean flying in every direction? This is what we're doing, our spiritual practice, that we're doing everything that we can in order to reach the goal on our own. Say, I can do it. A little ego is there, a little pride. Yeah, I can do it on my own. I don't need any help. I'll try this way. If it doesn't work, I'll try that. We do all of that. And then by the time we're finished with the fourth direction, we realize that, no, I can't do it on my own. I have to take refuge with the ship. So, could the bird in the very beginning just say, okay, wherever the ship takes me, I'll go? No, why not? Because it hadn't tried. We have to do everything in our power to achieve God realization before we realize that our powers are limited, nigra. But it's necessary. It's necessary in order for us to reach that state of surrender. Plus, while we're doing all of this spiritual practice, we're transforming ourselves so that we're able to accept grace. Otherwise, in the beginning, we just say, oh, yeah, whatever happens, happens. That doesn't mean anything. There's nothing to it. So this is Thakur also, when he says, raise your sail and catch the breeze, we don't realize what it means. That first you have to row the boat. You have to get it all the way out. It takes a lot of hard work. And then the sail is very heavy to raise it. It's not such a simple thing. But once we've done it, then the breeze of grace comes, and then we sit back. So this nigra, when we say nigra kim karishiti, what that means? Is that enough? No. But can we skip it? No. So we have to do all of our spiritual practice at the same time understand that this breeze of grace has to come and help us, carry us the rest of the way. Now, what is this breeze of grace? Is the divine presence within. Why do we call it grace? These are very subtle ideas. If we think of Thakur's example of there's a reservoir of water, we're trying to bring water to the field. The reservoir has to be higher than the level of the field, right? So we dig a canal. That's our hard work. We have to do all of that. No matter how beautiful a canal is, no matter how deep it is, how ready it is, nothing will happen until we release the water. So we keep a little floodgate there at the beginning. Otherwise the water will come and spill over everything. It won't reach the field. And then when we raise it, then the water comes on its own. Now, what is the grace aspect? The water is trying to fill the field. It is ready to do it. We're preventing it. The ego is that floodgate which is keeping that water from coming. So the grace aspect is that God is trying to enter into us. Brahman is there, hidden behind this little floodgate of ego. And we're trying to get rid of that, and then it automatically comes on its own. Then there's no effort. This is the grace element to it. So whenever we read these statements, that this sage, sage of steady wisdom, someone who has his senses under control, that's also grace. This happens through grace. Very few people will have that power, and if they have that power, that means they're born with very, very good, pure samskaras, which is also grace. If we can be born like that. Okay. Then Yanisha Sarvabhutanam Tasyam Jagarati Samyami Yasyam Jagarati Bhutani Sanisha Pashyito Munehe. Now, what is the difference between an enlightened soul and an ordinary soul? Everything. Everything. What's daytime to us is nighttime. They'll sleep through it. All our parties, our enjoyments, our pleasures, that's nothing. And what is daytime for them they'll sit quietly and they'll feel the joy of God within their hearts and everything. And we'll sit quiet and they say, well, this is really boring, nothing to do. Huh? So everything is the opposite. We'll say, what could be more real than this room, these physical objects, these objects of the senses? What can be more real than that? And they'll say, well, what could be less real? What could be more dreamlike? The only reality is the self within. Well, the self within, what are you talking about? So a complete opposite. What they're awake to. They're awake to this world of divinity. They're awake to that, and everything else is like a dream, a passing show. It doesn't affect them at all. And we're the opposite. The world is everything to us. You talk about God, I don't know what you're talking about. Huh? The pretty words and everything. The self. Self is the source of all joy. What do you mean self is? Joy comes from having a good time. Because we haven't reached that state. So this is just to show that this difference is not a subtle difference, it's a radical difference. A very radical difference. So what's daytime to us, they have no interest. That's their nighttime, they'll sleep through that. They could care less of it. And the exact opposite. What we think is important is nothing for them. What they think is important, we haven't reached the ability to appreciate it yet. Now, of course, there's a lot of in-between period. We can reach a state where, yes, we get a glimpse of that state of mind. We understand it, we appreciate it, we long for it. So it's not so day and night with us. We're in that twilight area a little bit. But this is talking about really the worldly person as opposed to the God-realized person. Just to show this how stark the difference is. Then, apurivanam achala parishtham samudram apa pravashanti yadvat tadvat kama yam pravashanti sarve sashanti mapnod nakama kami. Now, we talked a lot about desires yesterday. Is it possible to get rid of all desire? No. Some little desire may be there. How about for the God-realized soul? Do they have desires? Alina?
Yes.
They have desires. What kind of desires?
To go to the temple.
Okay, they'll have good desires. They'll have good desires. But because of these old memories, these old samskaras of the mind, there may be other desires that will just come into the mind, just kind of a remnant of some old things. That without realizing it sometime, some little enjoyment that they had, some desire may come like that. For Sri Ramakrishna, of course, he tried to keep these little desires. Holy Mother, they may have a desire to go on pilgrimage someplace, have a desire for some type of enjoyment. Maybe they'll be surprised. Oh, that little desire came into my mind. I haven't thought about that in so many years. And they'll laugh. It's a funny thing. It won't affect them. What's the example that we're given here? Look at the river when it comes out of the Himalayas. How strong, raging, strong river it is. If you go on pilgrimage to these places, and you have to take a bath in there, they'll have to put these chains there so you don't get washed away. The river is so strong. Anybody go to Kedarnath, Badrinath, these places? Rudraprayag, you're supposed to bathe at all of these. Even some places, Rishikesh, they'll have some chains there. Otherwise, you can be swept away. It's so strong. Then look at that same Ganga when it enters into Gangasagar. When it goes into the ocean. Yes, you can't even tell where the river ends and where the ocean is, and they go back and forth a little. It raises no waves whatsoever in the ocean. Is the ocean higher because it's going there? No, it enters into it, but it has no effect on it. It's a beautiful illustration. This is what is the state of the This is how desires enter into the mind of the Sthitaprajna. They may come, little desires. We have to understand that as long as the body lives, some desire will be there. It's just part and parcel of what it means to be a human being. And these desires will have no hold on the mind. They won't raise any waves in the mind. They'll simply watch them as if they belong to somebody else. They won't have any effect. Now, there's a very interesting term here. Kama kami. What does your translation say about that?
I have the same one as you, Sankaracharya.
Oh, okay. Who has, anybody else?
Ours from Tapasyananda is not he who runs madly after objects of desire.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This is the standard translation, Kamahami. This because they follow Shankaracharya, and it makes sense. But I like to take it literally. It's very interesting that we take it literally. So this verse is saying, who attains peace? This person into whom these desires come, not the Kamakami. That means, according to this, those who desire are objects of desire. Right? But Kamakami can be one who desires. That means we like to have desires. We we don't recognize that desire is the source of our problem. We think life will be boring if we don't have desires. So the desire of desires, kama, kami. Huh? Yeah. If we analyze the mind, that we really think that how boring life would be if there aren't things that we're running after. If we have everything we want, there's nothing that we need, then it'll be a boring type of life. So not only is the mind full of desires, but we like to have desires. We want to have desires. If we fulfill one, we hope it gets replaced by another one. Kama kami. That'll be more of a literal. Anyhow, both translations are good. But the point is that we shouldn't expect desires to completely disappear, because as long as we have a human body, that these desires may come. Just a remnant of the past will come, but it won't have any effect on the mind of the Sthitaprajna.
But the desires which will come, will it be materialistic desire or it will be spiritual desires?
No, they can be. They won't be gross types of desires, but they can be. I remember I had a wonderful meal one time there, and wouldn't it be nice to have it again? They'll be harmless desires.
Okay.
They'll be harmless desires. But those other types of desires aren't really desires. Thakur doesn't classify them as desires. And for the Sthitaprajna, even say the desire to go on pilgrimage to a holy place, that won't be very. If it's there, it won't be very strong. They've realized everything. There's nothing more to see. They've done everything. But these are the other little desires for some type of harmless enjoyment may come up just as an old samskara. But it won't mean anything. So they're helpful, because if we think that we have to be absolutely free from desires, it's impossible. We shouldn't raise the bar that high. Now, Thakur will say that even if tiny desire is there, it's like trying to thread a needle. If one little fiber is sticking out, it won't go through. We think, oh wow, then it's too hard, it's impossible. But at the final moment, then no desire will come. At that final moment, we know that now this life is over. At that point, nothing will rise up in the mind. So we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't think at this very moment, I have to be free from all desires. I've seen so many great souls in our order that could enjoy so many things. We have a very great misconception. The Sthitaprajna will be such a dull, boring person. So many of our sadhus, I think, were big sports fans. And Swami Ramakrishna, how he would love to watch these football matches, and he himself would play sports and everything. Swami Lokeshwaranandaji, He would stay up in the middle of the night to watch a cricket match sometime. But with such detachment. But still, some enjoyment. And the mind, yes. What is the mind occupied with? This mind that's raised to a higher level. They can enjoy simple things also. But it has no effect on them. That they won't be miserable if their team loses, the team that they like if they win. Okay, they'll just watch it. So we shouldn't think that this Sthitaprajna is a very dry type of person. Thakur prayed to Mother, Mother, don't make me a dry sadhu. Yeah, he said, don't make me a dry sadhu. Let me enjoy the world a little bit like that. He would go to the theater. Older Mother also went to the theater with Girish Ghosh. Unheard of for a sadhu in those days. Even now, they go to the theater. Unheard of. He would go. He would enjoy it. He would have a desire to visit the house of different devotees, do things like that. Of course, he had to keep the mind a little bit lower. Okay, so Vihaya Kaman Yas Sarvan Pumans Charati Nispriha Niramamo Nirahankara Sashanti Madhyachati. So now we're summing everything up. We're getting to, this is really the last verse of some type of instruction. The final one will kind of just close this chapter. So someone who was able to vihaya, that means abandon, to set aside all desires. Now we understand all desires means all these are harmful desires. Can set aside all of these and can live in the world in such a way that he's not running after things all of the time. Spriha, this without this thirst, we're always trying to quench our thirst. Always trying to scratch that itch. That is always there, that it keeps coming back and moving to different places. They don't have that at all. Now, nirmama and nirahankara, that they won't claim anything as mine. You won't hear them talk about my this, my that, and even I. They'd be perfectly free from ego and pride. Thakur, when he would refer to himself, what would it be? Ekankar. Yeah. Ekani, Ekankar. Ekankar belonging to this. Just this place. He could use the I, but very often he would speak in those terms. Even if he used the word I, he got criticized once by, who was it? One of them. He said, let these other people talk about this and that instead of I. You have no ego, don't worry about it. But anyhow, the point is that he had no sense, because everything was Divine Mother. He had no sense, he didn't do anything at all. We were talking yesterday about Shokli Tomaricha. Everyone said everything is your will, Mother, that I am the instrument, you do that. You do everything, only we say that I'm just an instrument in your hands. Thakur could say that. Holy Mother could say that. Swamiji could say that. We can't say that. This song represents a very high state of spirituality, where there's no mama, there's no ahankar. There's no I and there's no mine whatsoever. If that ego is completely eliminated, then who does everything? Mother alone dwells there. The devotee is gone or has merged in Mother. Otherwise, for us, we can take the attitude that yes, I'm doing everything to the best of my ability. Mother is taking care of the fruits. So Swamiji says, when we act, feel that we're in control of everything. When the results come, say everything is out of my hands. I did the best I can. Now, Mother, now it's your will. Then we can say it's Mother's will. But we can't say whatever I do is the will of the Divine Mother. It's a terrible hypocrisy. We'll do all sorts of nonsense and blame Mother for that. But this God-realized soul, this is free from this I and mine. Such a person attains to this peace, shanti, adhikachiti. Then we get to the final verse. Esha Brahmi Sthitaprajna. This is what it means to be merged in Brahman. This is what it means to live in Brahman. This is what it means to have our being one with the Brahman. To have attained to this highest goal, to know our real nature. It's a very beautiful verse. I love this last verse. Esha Brahmi Sthitaprajna. Nainam prapya vimukhyati. Once we reach that state, then there's no more chance of any delusion coming. We won't fall under this veil of Maya ever again once we've attained to that state. Sthitvasyam. Once we're established in that, antakalipi, even at the end of our life, at the final, it's not like we'll be like King Bharat. At the last minute, we'll think of this deer instead, and we'll be reborn as a deer. That won't happen. If we're established in this state, then even at the very end, we attain to the state of Brahma Nirvana. And this is one of the reasons why some scholars think that this is a little bit of Buddhist influence. We don't find this Nirvana term much in Vedanta at all. It's more of a Buddhist term. But anyhow, we attain to that state of Nirvana has two meanings. One, that is extinguished. That whatever was there that would cause us to be born again is extinguished. But in this Brahma part means that we've entered into that state of oneness. So there's no more rebirth, that the final goal has been reached. So this is that transition from Jivan Mukta to Videha Mukta. We go from the state of being a God-realized soul during this lifetime to someone who has attained to final liberation. So this is the end of that beautiful section, Sthitaprajna section. We wanted to leave time for the kids, but we have a little time maybe for some questions and some discussion. Yes.
Maharaj, I myself struggle with this a lot even now. On the one hand, we understand that, or I theoretically understand, don't do it yet, that every day to maintain a regular schedule, wake up at a time and then do the meditation and all of that, twice if you can, and all of that, is good. At the same time, we hear that going to pilgrimages, or for example, if we go to Washington Ashrama, it gives another kind of joy to us. That's also a desire of some sort, and we really become happy going there. Another kind which I'm not counting it, we become very happy when, say, these kids come on Sunday mornings, because ideally we see more face of God when we see other devotees. We become very happy. Tell me, if you can, is that a bad desire or I won't say bad and good, is it a desire I should get out of? Rather, because then I am perhaps diluting my own sadhana, even if there was no excitement, no devotee coming, not going to pilgrimages. That is actually hard, but that is something I am told one should do, to be steadfast, regular, in a so-called boring way. So when I look forward to travel to places, or when I look forward to people visiting us, those desires are distracting or they are helping? What do you say?
Each of these scenarios that you spoke of three different things, and they don't contradict each other. We want to be very regular in our spiritual practice. From time to time, we want to go on pilgrimage. We want to get some renewed enthusiasm in spiritual life, and at the same time, we take joy when we see people come and even aside from that, say the grandparents see their grandchildren, how happy they are. Is there anything wrong with that? Of course not. Of course not. We should take joy. We should rejoice in every aspect of life. But we should see that divinity there. Why? What joy will we take in seeing the children if we don't see that divine light shining through their eyes? Huh? That is the real key to all of this. So everything should be spiritualized. We spiritualize everything, then we can enjoy this world. Tena tyaktena bhunjita. We sometimes don't give enough attention to this, the third pada of the Isha Upanishad, first verse, that if we can renounce this ignorance, if we can really see divinity everywhere, we can enjoy everything. By virtue of learning how not to have attachments and expectations and clinging and everything, we can freely enjoy everything in this world. Of course, it has to be dharmic. We know to avoid very tamasic and rajasic things and everything. But to tell a parent that they shouldn't take joy in their children doing well in school, or grandparents with their kids and everything, it's silly. We're not puritanical. We can have our enjoyments with. People reach a certain stage in spiritual life where they'll go to movies sometimes. And almost everything they see will awaken something. They'll feel some joy, some spiritual joy out of it. That just this divine play, this not a lila, seeing God dwelling within human beings, brings tremendous joy. So look at Ramakrishna. How he said, even going into a place where there's a multitude of people, he would go to the Maidan in Calcutta, and how much joy he would get, seeing divinity throbbing everywhere, all around him, or to go into nature. The joy we can get out of that, if we see it with the eyes of a spiritual seeker. That way. So. We shouldn't limit ourselves too much. We should understand that sometimes if we're doing things out of restlessness, if we're doing things to avoid doing our hard spiritual work, that every time we feel like I want to stick to this routine and it's too hard, then we say, okay, let me go here, let me go there. We have to analyze the mind, see how much is simply restlessness. But other than that, these are all helpful, positive things. Pilgrimage is very helpful from time to time. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Grace is something comes to someone who is deserving. And is this something one can pray for grace?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It may come to people who are undeserving.
Okay.
This is one of the features of grace. Actually, none of us are deserving. If suppose God reveals Himself, we have God realization now. Will any of us say, "I deserved it"? None of us deserve it. This is the meaning of grace. That our understanding or feeling is that it was unmerited. That there's nothing that we did, no matter how much spiritual practice we do. The joy of God realization will be so great that we'll feel we gave a penny on the dollar to get this realization. What we gave was nothing compared to what we received. This is one of the reasons why we speak of grace, that it's unmerited. Now, will it come to someone who deserves it less than somebody who deserves it more? Thakur talks about that type of grace. Like somebody begs the child for something, says, "No, I won't give it to you." And then a stranger comes and he throws it to him. He talks about that also. But most of the time he talks about that we ourselves have to prepare ourselves and then automatically it'll come. More of a universal type of grace. But, what we receive, of course I'm not talking from personal experience, what we receive will be so much greater than we could have ever imagined, that we'll feel that, yes, nothing that I did warrants the gift that I've been granted. That's why we think of it in terms of grace. Now there's a different type of grace. There are two levels of grace. That when they talk about Shankaracharya in his Vivekachudamani, he says there are three different types of grace. One is this human birth, Manushyatvam, and then Mumukshayatvam. Then this is the longing for liberation, and then Mahapurusha Samsraya, that we get the grace of a guru. We get all of these things. This is a preliminary grace. So Thakur gives an illustration that there's a king, and he wants to visit the house of one of the subjects in his kingdom. It's a poor kingdom. And he knows that if he shows up at the house of these poor people, they'll be terribly embarrassed, they won't be able to serve him nicely and everything. So he sends his minister ahead of time. And the minister goes there and says to them, there's a chance that you might get a special visitor. I've been sent to help clean up your house a little bit and to give you some new furniture and a nice tea set and get everything all arranged. So that if the visitor comes, then everything will be all spick and span, and you'll be able to receive them nicely. So that's also grace. That's also grace that allows the heart to become purified, and we can get all of the gifts that are necessary. That means devotion and dispassion and vairagya, all of these different things. But when the king comes, that's the ultimate grace. So that will be the final type of grace. So everything that this is all grace. That there's a center here, that you can all get together and for this type of satsang. This is all grace. We can look upon everything as grace. We can look upon the worst tragedy in our life that turns the mind a little bit towards God. That's also a type of grace. Anything that helps us in our spiritual life that we ourselves didn't do, that happens, we can look upon that as grace also. Okay, shall we turn the show over to the kids?